Welcome to Yoke's YouTube channel. Today we will be looking at express entry documents requirement. We're starting a series. So today we will be discussing about the Educational Credential Assessment. It's a very commonly asked question. There are quite a few in regards to Educational Credential Assessment, how long it's valid for, where can I do my assessment, is it the right credentials that I have received, and can I do multiple organizations do my credential assessments, so on and so forth. So we will be looking at each of those topics in detail, so you'll have a better idea by the end of this presentation. So leave us your comment in the description box and let us know your queries and comments and your suggestions as well. So to begin with, I'm Liz Matthew, the Regulated Canadian Immigration Consultant. Nice to have you all here. So if you do have any inquiries or any suggestions or any concerns, leave it in the description box and happy to help. So ECA, Educational Credential Assessment, what is it? So it is basically if you do have a foreign education outside Canada, you will require a credential assessment to be done. So that is the Educational Credential Assessment that has to be done for your outside Canada education in order to use that, in order for you to claim points for your foreign education. So that's what ECA. And ECA, Educational Credential Assessment, when you do it with organization, there is for academic purpose as well as for immigration purpose. So make sure you do always select it for immigration purpose. So if you have done it for academic purpose, be it for your job or any other related purpose, make sure when you do apply to Immigration Canada, you have redone for you can get copies, a duplicate copy for immigration purpose, and you'll be able to use it. So ECA report and the reference number that is required for your express entry profile. So after your assessment is done is when the reference number is issued. Okay, and if you completed your education outside Canada and you need an educational credential assessment to be eligible as the principal applicant for the Federal Skilled Worker Program Express Entry, and to earn points for your education you got outside Canada, and earn points for your spouse or common law partner's education if they are coming with you in Canada. So that's the main purpose of your ECA. So by doing your ECA, you become eligible under the Federal Skilled Worker category, because ECA is a requirement. If you need to, basically, you cannot just say that, yes, I had an education outside Canada, but if you didn't do an ECA on it, that is not counted. So that is a requirement, and by claiming the ECA, by giving the ECA reference number, you get points added for your education outside Canada to your express entry profile. And if you're adding your spouse as an accompanying spouse on your express entry profile application, yes, your spouse, if they do have a foreign work experience, include their ECA, and yes, they will be able to claim points for their outside Canada education. And for in Canada education, you do not require an ECA to be done, as your as it's a Canadian education. Only education that is done outside Canada, foreign education, requires an ECA. An ECA report must show that your completed foreign credential is equal to the Canadian secondary school or post-secondary school credential. They'll have after the assessment is done, they'll have whatever the equivalency is in that report. So that's what you should be using for your express entry profile. And how long it's valid for. ECA, the validity is 5 years. and it must be valid. It must be less than 5 years when you complete your express entry profile and you submit your application. So that's very important that it's still valid when you complete your profile as well as submit your application. And if you received an ITA, ECA must be valid when you plan to apply. And if you haven't applied as well, ECA should be valid for the rest of the time you'll be in the pool. And if ECA expires before you can apply, contact the organization that's issued the ECA, as duplicate copies can be issued depending on the organization. They'll basically renew it for you. You don't have to go ahead and do the whole process over again. You can just go for a renewal. Because if you applied with an expired ECA, refusal of your application, the likelihood is very high. So do make sure your educational credential assessments are valid when you do submit the application. And which credentials you need to get assessed. A lot of people do have multiple education, and only the highest level of education is required to be assessed in most cases. So say if you have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, you don't need to do it for the bachelor's. You only need to do it for the master's. But that is in most cases. But when to get it assessed for 2 or more credentials, to get the points for having 2 or more credential, ECA, Educational Credential Assessment, has to be done for both of it. Then only you get the 2 or more credentials. But say if you have a Canadian education and then you have 1 foreign work experience, then it is 2 or more credentials, and you need to do the ECA for your foreign credentials to get the full points for more than 1 credentials. And it is very necessary that at least one of the credentials must be 3 or more years of study. So say if both are 2 years, then you don't get the 2 or more credentials points. So one of your credential needs to be 3 or more years of study. And when to get your secondary education assessed, like quite a lot of people just have a high school and they don't know if they need to do the assessment. Well, that is to get your secondary school assessed, yes, you need to do an ECA. So post-secondary credential is not equivalent to a Canadian credential. If you could get your secondary credential assessed, this would get you points for completing secondary school. Okay, so who can do your assessment? So where to get my assessment done? So ECA, Educational Credential Assessment, from an organization or a professional body designated by IRCC. IRCC has already have their designation list, and we will be talking about that shortly. And so it has to be done from one of those organizations that's already been designated. And a report with your educational equivalency in Canada will be said in that report that you will be getting. And the processing times and the cost of going to do your assessment through that particular organization varies. So every organization has their different cost, processing time, and the designated organization or a professional body will instruct you how to submit documents for assessment. So you basically, the processing, the style of processing and the instruction on what to submit, how to submit, everything will be there on the designated organization's website or the professional body. So you can either get it done through the designated organization or the professional body, depending on what is your primary occupation. Okay, and the designated organizations. So as we just discussed, so There is several organizations where IRCC do accept educational credentials done. So one is the CES, Comparative Education Services, through the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. And then there is another one, the International Credential Assessment Service of Canada, and the World Education Services, WES, and International Qualification Assessment Service, which is ICAS, and International Credential Evaluation Service, British Columbia Institute of Technology, so that is ICES. So these are all organizations that do the same assessment. So why this list is listed out here is that these are the organizations that IRCC accepts the credential assessment from. So you cannot get your credential assessment from any other organization except the one listed here. The most common is the World Education Services, WES, as the processing time to get your educational assessed is it's not too long. A month or so is what typically it's seen. But your transcripts, original needs to come from your university to WES directly. So it is in some cases depends on how soon your university responds. So it could take time in some cases, but the World Education Service is the most commonly used one, as it's the most fastest. And we also talked about designated professional bodies. So what is that? So if your primary occupation, so in your express entry profile, you have to select a primary occupation. So if your primary occupation is an architect, doctor, or a pharmacist, you need to do your educational credential assessment from the designated professional body. That is very important. So architects, primary occupation, if your express entry profile has a primary occupation of NOC 21200, yes, you need to do it through the designated professional body, which is Canadian Architectural Certification Board, CACB, if your primary occupation is only that. So say if, for example, you don't need a license and you are working, you have the education, but you're not working in that particular field as an architect, you don't need to, say you're working as a project manager at a construction firm, then you don't need to do the ECA through this professional designated body. You can do it through any of the other designated organizations. So that is something to be noted. So, but if you are already an architect with the primary occupation of NOC 21200 and your ECA was issued by another designated organization before October 31st, 2024, this will be accepted. But say it has been expired. If your ECA is expired and it was anything prior to October 31st, 2024, yes, it will be accepted. So in some cases, you don't need a license if you are using the architect title and responsible for the design and construction of homes or building. So in that case, you can just use the credential assessment from any of the designated organization. You don't need to use the specific Canadian Architecture Certification Board assessment. So that's something that might help out somebody. So contact the regulatory body in the province where you live and to see if you really need licensing to practice as an architect in that particular province. So the next designated professional organization is specialist and family physician. So if your primary occupation is NOC 31100, NOC 31101, or 31102, you must get an ECA report for your primary medical diploma from the Medical Council of Canada, if your primary occupation is in any of the three that I've just listed. So if that is not your primary occupation, then you can do it from any designated organization. Doesn't have to be from a designated professional body, the Medical Council of Canada. You don't need to do it with them. Okay, so that's something that you need to watch out for. And pharmacist is also another, they also have the designated professional body, so which is the Pharmacy Examining Board of Canada. Must do your assessment if your primary occupation is as a pharmacist, which is NOC 31120. You need a license to practice. For example, you need a license if you are caring for patients in community pharmacy, hospital pharmacy, long-term care facility, and also other practice settings. So that's something to watch out for. Basically, if you are working as a pharmacist in the and using the primary NOC code 31120, get your education outside Canada assessed with the Pharmacy Examining Board of Canada. And contact your regulatory body if you're in the province that you are working, if a license is required. That is very important to be noted. So that's basically what it is, and basically to point out the importance of an educational credential assessment. It's very important to get this done, as stated in the beginning of the presentation, that getting your educational credential assessment is very important, as the points that you claim for your education outside Canada, you can only claim it only if an educational credential assessment is completed on that education. As the education as is in Canada that you have done outside Canada is not acceptable. Only after the education credential assessment is done, that is being accepted. So you do need to make sure that you have your credentials done, be it for yourself or your spouse, your dependent spouse. So make sure this is done properly and in a timely fashion, so your profile doesn't get eligible. And we are always here to help you out. And thank you for tuning in. See you all in the next video.